Awesome. Hey, as we go through this series of Eyewitness, it's really us going through the book of John. And what you might know, or you probably won't know, is that the book of John is actually framed often around what's known as the 7 I am statements, where Jesus said I am 7 times. But there's also 7 sort of miracles or signs, is what John calls them, through this book. And as we lead up to Easter, we're just going one by one through these different miracles. And when John wrote his account of the life of Jesus, he didn't write this account simply so that we would know what took place. Actually, John said, no, my purpose is so much deeper. My purpose in writing this is more meaningful than that. And fortunately for us, at the end, or towards the end of his account that he wrote, this is what he said. He gives us his purpose statement. He said, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. And when he says book, he doesn't mean the entire Bible. He just means, hey, the account that he wrote, called John. But he says, but these ones are written. And here's where he tells us why he's written, not so that we know, but so that we may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. And lastly, we looked at this a little bit more, but let me just touch on it real quickly. Oftentimes, when we use the words faith or the words believe within a church context or a theological context, we get the words wrong. Where we add all this extra meaning to them than we do. We always know what we talk about when I say I believe this in any other area of life. And what I want to just encourage us to do is know that when we use these words in a theological setting, in a church setting, they should mean the exact same thing. And if someone's using those words in a different way, that's on them, not on you. When John says, I want you to believe, that's kind of what he does. He wants us to believe. That at the end of the day, Christianity isn't simply about just believing or simply have faith. Oftentimes in Christian circles, people are like, just believe. You've just got to have more faith. But if we were to sit down with John and say, John, why did you follow Jesus? John, why did you give up so much to follow him? And if we were to ask this of the early disciples too, they wouldn't say that they simply followed Jesus because of faith. They didn't just follow Jesus because of faith. No. They'd say, no, we follow Jesus. John would say, I follow Jesus because of what I saw, because of what I heard, because of what happened in front of me, because of what I could touch. He'd say it wasn't just about faith. No. It's because of what I saw, because of what I heard. In fact, John, who wrote the book of John, he actually wrote 4 other what we call books in the New Testament. And in one of the other ones, he starts it off sort of by saying this. He says, from the beginning, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, and he's talking about Jesus here. He says, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. And the word of life means Jesus. The life appeared, and we have seen it, and we testify to it. I'm an eyewitness to it. We proclaim to you what we have seen and what we have heard. So you believe things because of what you've seen. He'd say, I believe Jesus is the Son of God because of what I've seen. And this isn't stuff that's just been passed on to me. This isn't something that I thought up one night when I was sitting in the room. No. This took place, and I saw it with my own eyes. I heard it with my own ears. I touched it with my own hands. This is what I can be an eyewitness of. See, as John lays out his account, like I said, he's writing this so that his author, that his readers one day will believe what he's written. Not just know it, but believe it. This is kind of the way that he builds his case. He talks about some different events that took place, right? But these were more than events. These were miracles. Right? Last week we talked about the water that turned into wine. That's not just an event. That's like a supernatural miracle that's taken place. But John would say, yeah, it's not just a miracle. It's more than a miracle. This was a sign. This was a sign that points to something even greater. He'd say that these signs are actually evidence. And these are evidence that enables you to believe that. When I saw this was the evidence that helped me, and therefore I'm putting it forward as evidence to help you believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And he goes even further, he says, so that you'll have faith in, or you'll trust in Him. And so with that in mind, what I want to do today is lead us now into what John calls the second sign. And this is how John records it. It's in John chapter 4. He says, once more, he, being Jesus, visited Cana. Now, some of you, if you were here last week, you'll remember where Cana is, right? Cana is the place where the first miracle took place, where the water turned into wine. So once more, Jesus visited Cana in Galilee, where he turned the water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son was sick. So there's a royal official. This man was most likely, scholars would tell us, a Sadducee. He was someone who was well respected, had a high standing in terms of community. He was someone that was used to giving orders. He was someone that was, in the upper class, that probably wouldn't talk to or spend a lot of time with those in the castes below him. But his son lay sick. And then just gives us a little bit more detail here, John does. His son lay sick at Capernaum. And the reason that this is important is Capernaum from Cana is about an 8-hour walk. If you were to walk this, it would take you about an 8-hour sort of effort. If you were to do it on a horse, you're probably looking at about 3 hours on a horseback, or 3 hours if you're being sort of towed in a carriage. So it was a significant difference. What's actually taken place since the last miracle? Jesus was in Cana. Then Jesus actually went to Capernaum for a few days. From there, Jesus went up to Jerusalem, which was where he met with Nicodemus and had that conversation Mike talked about being born again. From Jerusalem, he came down to Samaria, and in Samaria, he met with a woman at the well. And then after meeting with the woman at the well, he's obviously made his way back to Cana. Okay, so there's this royal official who's quite high up in society. His son is really sick. He has made a trip from Capernaum over to Cana. And why did he do this? John tells us. He says, when this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and heal his son who was close to death. So his son's really, really sick. He's close to death. And so this man's in a situation, and maybe you've been there before. Maybe you've had someone you care about, someone you love that's close to death. And there's nothing you can do. And your hands are tied because you don't know what to do to make things right. That's where this father is. He's in this position where he knows his son's dying. And he makes a decision to walk away from his son's bedside. And whether he walked there or went on horseback, we don't know, we're not told. But he made a significant trek to go and talk to this person who'd probably heard whispers about, who'd probably heard stories about. Maybe he'd heard about the water being turned into wine. Maybe he had heard other accounts of the miraculous things that Jesus had done. Maybe he'd heard whispers going on that the Son of God had arrived on this planet, but it heard something that said, hey, I've got to go to him. And I try and understand what it must have been like for this dad who would have wanted to be with his son. The son's close to death, that it'd be very hard to walk away from your son's bedside, knowing that if you walked away, you might come back and you passed. And you wouldn't get to hug him one more time. You wouldn't get to be with him. You wouldn't get to tell him that you loved him. You wouldn't get to hear his voice. But for some reason, this dad decides to walk away. And I think from as a male, I think I can understand this decision, because I think one thing that most of us males hate is not being able to do something. We always find ourselves in life where we're in situations, and sometimes you just, I think the hardest thing as a male, and some of the males are not even, there's nothing harder than being in a position where you want something to change but you can't change it. There is absolutely nothing you can do. It's terrifying, it's hard, it sucks, and as a male it's so frustrating to be in that situation. And I wonder if this dad maybe was just at this point going, well, at least if I go, I'm doing something. At least I'm trying. At least I'm being proactive. I'll go on this walk. If I come back and my son's dead, at least I can maybe justify something in here because I've actually made an effort. I've gone to try and do something. I haven't just sat around and done nothing. Who knows? But he went for this walk. And what's interesting is here John records for us that this royal official begged. He got in front of Jesus and he begged. This isn't a man that's accustomed to begging. This isn't a man who's accustomed to going to people, especially people who as Jesus would have been seen in society at the time as a few rungs below him on the ladder. And he just let his pride go. And he begged, and that probably would have caused a scene of people going, what's this guy doing? Does he not know who he is? But he's desperate. He's got no one else to turn to. Again, maybe you've been there at some stage in your life where I really need this person's help. I really need them to do something for me. And embarrassment is not even a factor anymore. Pride's not even a factor anymore because if you don't come through, my son's going to die. And what's my life going to be like if my son dies? So he's begging Jesus to come and help. And Jesus' response is often seen as being critical, is often seen by people as Jesus rebuking or being mean. But I don't think Jesus is being horrible here. I think Jesus is just being honest. Because Jesus' response is, unless you people see signs and wonders, you'll never believe. Unless you see, you won't believe. And that's just an honest statement, right? Because seeing is believing. It's when we see something for ourselves that we can believe it. Someone can tell us something, but oftentimes, yeah, we can put a bit of trust in that, a bit of faith in that, a bit of belief in it, but I want to see it for myself. So Jesus says, hey, this is how humans are made. This is how humans are wired. Seeing is believing. And so unless you see signs, unless you see wonders, you'll never believe. And just a little bit earlier in John 2, just after what took place, with the water turning into wine, John actually captures this for us, and he makes it obvious. He says this in John 2:23. He says, now while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, many people saw the signs he, being Jesus, was performing and believed in his name. Why? Because seeing is believing. John's our eyewitness. He saw and he believed. Now he wants us to believe. Not based on what we see, but based on what he saw. John continues. He says, the royal official said to Jesus, Sir, Sir. And he doesn't call people Sir. He's Sir. But here he is, putting himself there, humbling himself. Sir, Jesus, come down before my child dies. He's begging Jesus to come. So he's in a situation where I think as this royal official's gone to Jesus, this is how he sees life. He says, either I can convince Jesus, I can beg Jesus, I can twist his arm, I can do what needs to be done, and I can take Jesus with me and we'll go back home and my son will be healed. Or Jesus palms me off, says, no, I haven't got time, too far away, I've got things to do, it's not going to happen, but my son's going to die. This is probably the way he was looking at it, right? If Jesus comes, there's hope for my son. If Jesus doesn't come, do I even want to go home? And, Sir, come down before my child dies. Jesus looks at him. He says, go. Your son will live. Jesus is like, it's not that simple. It's not, I come, he lives, I stay, he dies. Jesus is like, no, I stay and your son lives. Go. Go and he will live. And the way Jesus says it is, he's not saying like, go, just hurry back. He's like, go, your son will live. And it's sort of said in such a way that it's like, just take your time, your hands are back. If you see a nice shop, go in, pick up some flowers for your wife. If you see something you like, maybe a friend, stay for dinner, talk. There's no rush. Just go. Your son will live. And I wonder if at this point that the man's like going, are you going to come with? Like, are you coming? Or am I seriously going back by myself? Are you sending me on my own? You're not going to come with me. I wonder if the man thought at some stage like, again, he's someone with a bit of power, authority. Could I just kidnap him? Could I just tie you up and bring you back with me, Jesus, just to make sure? Because the reality is, if I go without you, Jesus, and I get home, the chances are there's only going to be one death in the family. There's probably going to be two if my wife says we walk back down the driveway without you. Right? Jesus says, go. Your son will live. And this is why this is more than a miracle, it's a sign. Because this is where you live. This is where I live. This is where we spend our life. In this middle zone here, where we've got what Jesus has said, but we've got no certainty about what's going to happen. See, Jesus says, just go. Your son's fine. See, if it was today, if it was in this day and age, you'd be like, hold up, FaceTime. Hey, gorgeous. How's everything going at home? Young fellow, all right? Should be good by now. He is? Awesome. Sweet. Thanks, Jesus. Do you know what I mean? Like, that'd be a very easy walk home because he's got confirmation. He's zoomed in. The FaceTime's happened. He's got confirmation that his son's up, kicking back outside playing. Cool, I'm going to walk home, take it easy now because I know my son's sweet. But here he is in this situation where all he's got to go on is Jesus' word. Go. Your son will live. Sure? How can I trust you? Can you give me some proof of this? Oh, I want a guarantee here. Come on, Jesus, I need more than just this word. But all Jesus gives him is a word. Like, imagine if Jesus goes, come on, let's just go super screen, makes the screen appear. See, there's a view into the bedroom, some sweet. Where you go, mate? But he doesn't. And that's where we live, right? That's where we are. So, some of us, some of you in this room are sacrificing so much. You're being incredibly generous to others financially. You're being incredibly generous to others with your time. So some of us are putting others first rather than ourselves because of what Jesus has said. Some of us are pursuing purity like nothing else in a culture that's going their total other direction based on the promises of Jesus. And we've got no certainty how things are going to come together. So some people here, you've forgiven people that have hurt you in such a powerful way, in such a deep way, because of what Jesus has said. Not because you can see how things are going to work out on the other side of that forgiveness. You've got no certainty. You're like this, man. See what this is? This is like a lifetime compressed down into a day. As this man makes a decision. Can I take Jesus on his word and go home? Or do I need something more? Can I believe that my son's going to be okay simply because you've said so when I haven't got any confirmation? And then John tells us, the man took Jesus at his word and departed. The man decided to move forward as if what Jesus had said was true, even though he had no certainty that what Jesus said was true. I hope it's true. I've come all this way because I want it to be true. But can it really be true? How can you, all the way here in Kenya, kill my son all the way back in Tasmania? How? But he walked. See, the man took Jesus at his word. He believed. And he went. He behaved. He took action based on what He believed. And that's what we have to do. That's what we're called to do. To take Jesus at his word and believe. And as a result of that belief, take action. See the man who departed. You could say that he walked home by faith and not by sight. There was no certainty. There was no guarantee. He walked home by faith, not by sight. Many of us are living at least some areas of our life by faith, based on what Jesus has said, not by sight, because of what we see around us. And what happens next is so cool. What happens next is so special. And what happens next is something you hear that plays out in people's lives over and over and over and over and over. See, while he was still on his way, while this man was walking home, he hadn't got home yet. He hadn't had confirmation with his own eyes. But while he was on his way, his servants met him with news that his boy was living. Yeah, it's amazing when we act based on what Jesus has said. And there's a difference between acting on what Jesus has said and what we'd like Jesus to say. Okay? So just a lot of people make stupid decisions because of what they think Jesus is telling them to do, but Jesus never told them to do it. But when we live based on what Jesus said, when we make a decision, I'm going to pursue this lifestyle, I'm going to live with these boundaries, I'm going to live sacrificially, I'm going to love those that are around me, I'm going to forgive. When I make a decision to go in that direction, it's amazing how sometimes we don't see the full results, but as we're going along, that sense of certainty comes to us. Like, I know what I'm doing is right because this has happened, because that has happened. You don't have to see everything, but sometimes, generally all the time, you've got to be walking in that direction. And then the certainty comes. Even though you don't have full vision yet, it comes. When he inquired as to the time his son got better, they said to him yesterday, at 1 PM, the fever left him. Which to us doesn't mean much. Luckily, John gives us a little bit more detail. The father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to him, your son will live. It was uncertain. Now it's certain. He walked home by faith. But his faith wasn't something that it could be in. He walked home believing. But his belief wasn't something worth believing in. And so then John tells us that this man and his whole household believed. Well, why did they believe? Because seeing is believing, right? This whole takes place. He gets like, wow, my son's healed. Well, of course everyone's going to believe. Because everything just happened the way that Jesus said it would, of course. Would believe. Because seeing is believing. And then John wraps this little section up by saying, this was the second sign. There's more than a miracle, it's a sign. Because Jesus asked this man to do what he asks all of us to do, is to walk by faith. Not based on what we've seen, but based on what we've heard. Heard from an eyewitness, like John. This was the second sign that Jesus performed after coming from Judea to Galilee. A little side note here, I just find this fascinating. The first miracle took place. It was at a wedding. It was a celebration. It was a party time. It was a mountaintop moment. Everyone's going for it. Second miracle takes place in a position of despair, heartbreak, devastation, valley. The cool thing about Jesus is he'll meet with you on the mountaintop and he'll meet with you in the valley. He'll be there when you celebrate and he'll be there when you're at the bottom. Either way, he's there. I just think that's cool. Let's just go back to this idea of walking by faith for him. Because this man, he walked by faith. Now, I just have to tell you this. There's a big difference. There's a big difference between walking by hope and walking by faith. Okay? Oh, I can hope that this is going to happen. But that's just me wanting it to. Walking by faith means, hey, I am trusting that Jesus is who he says he is and he's going to do what he says he can do. I'm walking by faith. And in Christians, we get this wrong all the time. Mike talked about Camp Survivor before. We've got Camp Survivor coming up. This time, we've only got 2 year groups coming, year 6 and year 8. That means we've got to get a whole lot of kids to register to come to camp, way more than we've had in the past, because previously we've had years 5 and 6 together and 7 and 8 together, and it's been easy to get all the spots. Okay? We could just go, by faith, we believe by faith that God's going to fill all these spots up and all the right kids are going to sign up and they're going to be there and we don't need to do anything. That's just hope. That's just like we want that to happen. But in the last 2 weeks, we've been into 15 different schools, standing up in front of assemblies, talking about camp, saying about what we're doing, handing out flyers. Why? Because we want kids to register. Do we think God wants to fill all those spots? Yes. But if we do nothing, we're just assuming the camp's going to fill up by hope. It's stupid. So many Christians have walked away from faith or caused others to walk away from faith because they've made a decision. They've done something and said, I'm just doing this by faith. And then it's blowing up in their face. They haven't done that by faith. They've done that in hope. They've wanted God to get on board with their plans, and they've wanted God to do what they think they should, rather than what faith actually is, which is us believing Jesus is who he says he is, and he's going to do what he says he can do. The most popular, the most well-known verse on faith is that faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's not just this hope that's being made more hopeful. Well, that's what we do sometimes. We're like, I just have more hope than I've got faith. No, you've just got more hope. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's evidence of things unseen. So don't ever make the mistake of thinking, if I'm walking by faith, when you're actually walking by hope. It's a big difference. It's a big difference. And John, well, I'm sure we'll cover the story at some stage, but John's, by the time he writes this, is a bit older. All of his friends, all the other apostles have died. They've all been brutally murdered, executed, killed. Not because of what they believed, but because of what they said they saw. And John, I think, at this point realizes what I've seen, what I've experienced, what I've heard, what I've touched is so unique. I believe it because of what I've seen, but how do I help other people believe this? Because seeing is believing, and they're not going to see what I saw and hear what I heard and touch what I touched. And so as he closes out his account, I think he's well aware of this. Probably because the amount of people he's engaged with and talked to about this. And he's seen their faces go like, man, I get that you believe it, but I've got to see it for myself. And so he says something that Jesus said. He says, Jesus told him, because you have seen me, you have believed. Seeing is believing. And we might say, well, come on, John, what about us? Who haven't seen, who haven't touched, who haven't witnessed. He says, well, blessed. This is in Jesus' words. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. See, John knew that people were going to read this. He probably didn't expect it to be read this far and this wide and this long after. But he knew even to the people that he was writing to, there were people that weren't going to see and weren't going to believe. So as he brings his account to a conclusion, he just says, hey, Jesus says, man, we believe because we've seen, but Jesus also was aware of the fact that he's going to be asking you to believe in him and put your trust in him without seeing. And he knows that's a big ask. But he just wants you to know that while we believe because we've seen, how you'll be blessed in a unique way. Because you can believe without having seen. And it's right after John writes this that he gives us his purpose statement. That Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in the book. But these are written so that you may believe. Even though you wouldn't have to see, you could have seen it. That Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. And by believing, you may have life in his name. I was going to invite the band to come back up because as we finish, there's a song we sung earlier. And it's just got this little line in it. It says, because you said it, I believe it. I can trust you with it. And that's what it means to walk by faith. So you and I, we're not going to be able to see what John saw. All we've got to rely on is his eyewitness account. Just like the man in the story had to take action. He had to walk home without visual confirmation, without that 100% certainty as to what was going to happen. Jesus says to us, hey, you've got what I've said. And blessed. Blessed are you if you believe it without having seen it. So why don't we stand to our feet here? Let's sing together.